If you missed our first three episodes, we had Jim Rogers, who's one of the best investors of the 20th century. But what we talked to him about was his life as an explorer, where he drove a motorcycle across the Sahara, Siberia, China, the whole world. And then we also have Ron Paul on our second episode, who everybody knows. And Peter Schiff is also on our third episode, so you can get to know him there. For the fourth episode of Let Us Disagree with Jimmy Morrison, we have our panel from the premiere of the fall of 2008 at Freedom Fest and the Anthem Film Festival in Palm Springs, California. We also received an award for independent filmmaking, so I included my remarks from that. You and I got to know each other, I guess it would have been 14 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, 2010, 2011.
Yes, yes.
I had seen you in the documentary American Drug War. You, back when you were governor in 1999, were the highest ranking public official to come out in support of decriminalizing marijuana. So that's actually how I first heard about you. I had my organization, Iowa Patients for Medical Marijuana. Before you ran for president, you rode Ragbri, and then we set up some events. We had a band playing. That band, the frontman Jake Dilley would go on to be my composer and sound designer for my documentaries. But we did some events and actually got some people to come hang out and talk about what was going on in the economy at the time and everything with the government. You went on to run for president as a Republican and then as a Libertarian. So I guess I want to ask you, going back to Ragbri, like, what did you think coming to Iowa and riding a bike all the way across the state of Iowa from the Missouri River to the Mississippi River?
Well, let me just skip that one, Jimmy, and tell you that this being the 8th year, 5 out of the last 8 years, I've done the Continental Divide mountain bike race, which is a 2,800-mile race from Banff, Canada to Antelope Wells, New Mexico on the Continental Divide Trail, and you have to be self-supported.
Man, that's amazing. A little different than the cornfields of Iowa.
Well, a little different than 20,000 people, riding 100 miles. But Ragbri was fun, but the Divide Ride race is a whole nother animal. Pretty amazing. Not surprisingly, during the Continental Divide mountain bike race, more than half the field dropped out every year. And of my 5 years, 34 days year one, 227 days, 125, and another 27. And every year, 2 to 3 days delay due to mechanical weather. And by weather, that might have meant mud, getting through mud in areas, and, bike is completely gunked up and you got to carry your bike over, areas of complete mud.
Anyway, so with that, obviously there's a huge physical endurance to it, but what's the mental endurance like to do something like that? Like, you spending that much time by yourself and facing all those challenges, like, are you cursing the world at some points, or like what's the experience like?
Not one curse. Always about, oh my gosh, able to do another pedal stroke. And maybe one takeaway, I believe that the last 3 years I did it, I was the oldest finisher.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I hate to say that, but that's kind of
how old are you now, Gary?
Well, 72.
72. That's unbelievable.
And to finish, to finish that race mid-pack or better, my best finish was 20th overall. Wow. It's consoling, personally consoling.
Yeah. Any animal encounters on those journeys?
Oh my gosh! So here we go. This would have been 4 years ago. The last time I did the Continental Divide race. I am north of Whitefish, Montana, by about 60 miles, headed to Whitefish. And there was, I want to say, over a 24-hour period, there was a 3 to 4 inch rain. And I am hunkered down for 24 hours plus in this rain to try and, survive it, not freeze to death. Anyway,
Mhm.
5 a.m. The rain had stopped that evening. At 5 a.m., I start off and I'm walking my bike because the rain has turned to snow above me. So I'm walking through snow ahead of me, maybe 50 yards, not very far. 50 yards is not very far, maybe less, 40 yards. But ahead of me on the same trail as I'm on is a grizzly bear going the same direction.
Wow.
What do you do? I'm here, I'm talking to you, so it did work out. But I started singing "Happy Birthday" as loud as I could. The bear turned around, looked at me, and sauntered off the trail. Not beat a bush off the trail, but sauntered off the trail. And I got to go past that point. And I'm
Oh
walking
man.
my bike because it's snow. And anyway, it worked out. I got on my bike. I pedaled as fast as I could. And once again, I'm here telling this story.
Yeah,
But
you're here today.
every year I'd see big wildlife, grizzly bears every year, but at a distance. And when they saw me, they got out of the way. One year I'm riding along and there's a grizzly bear cub right next to me. Well,
Mm.
what does that say? Mama's not far away. And that was one of those, how fast can you possibly pedal? Yeah, many stories. Mountain lions, at a distance, at a distance.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I guess let's go back a little bit. So, way before you were governor, back in 1974, you started Big J Enterprises, one-man handyman company that grew to over 1,000 employees, and you sold it at the end of the century. So, I guess one of the things I remember you saying was that you paid for everything since you were 17 years old. So,
Yeah.
when you were 17 and you started working, like what was the deal? Like why were you so ambitious as a 17-year-old, I guess, that you were able to make something like that happen?
Well, since I've been 17, I paid for everything, but getting off and doing my own thing happened at 21 years old. And what
Okay.
made me do that? Well, the contractor I was working for, and I was making $3.50 an hour, which was a king's ransom, in 1974. Uh, he ran out of work, and so I thought, well, I'll try and make $3.50 an hour, and basically, I did until I realized that holy cow, I could be charging a lot more, and people will be paying for it, and now I'm in business for myself, and on an hourly basis, I was charging $9 an hour. That happened in a very short amount of time. Well, if 350 was a king's ransom, $9 was I was on cloud nine. And that's the way it
Yeah.
started. And then people ask all the time, and you and I talked about it a lot. What do you attribute your success to? Well, when you're on time all the time, and I am anal about being on time, and when you do what you say you're going to do, keeping your word, that goes a long way. And you make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but as long as you make good by the mistakes, why isn't that person going to refer you to doing work for others? And that was kind of the model. If you do right by everybody, all it does is grow. That's all it does.
To fund my film projects in the beginning. Like I started a house painting business when I dropped out of college,
Yeah.
and it was the same thing where like it teaches you a lot about business and wages and everything. To the idea that like yes, you're making more money, but there's also that risk to it. Like the part of the reason you're making more money is because you don't have that guaranteed revenue every week. So if it does drop out, you just don't have any income coming in. And so I think when people like complain about wages, and that's a whole other argument with everything the Fed's done with inflation and stuff. But when people talk about their wages and complaining that their employer is stealing from them and that sort of thing, I think that doesn't take into account the security of being able to say like, yes, I'm making less money than I would if I was an entrepreneur, but I have that guaranteed check. I know that money's coming in. I don't have to worry about necessarily whether the business is doing the best or not. Obviously, long term, if the job goes away, that's a whole other thing. But just owning a painting business taught me a lot about economics, I guess. But going back to your company, Big J Enterprises, I believe you got your degree in political science. So you didn't get into politics until the 90s, but you started that company in the 70s. So was politics always a long-term thought for you, or was it
Yeah.
just something you were interested in?
No. Politics was always a long term. That was a goal, the notion of doing good by others, and I've always thought that politics was a high calling, and I pursued that. Um, and I've always told people that whatever it is apply it entrepreneurially, meaning get into business for yourself, doing what it is and the rewards are 10 times that you'd find working for somebody else.
Yeah, I think there's a huge benefit in that direct connection where you realize how you're benefiting someone. Your customer is willing to give the money to you because they value what you're doing more than that money to them.
Well, and as a libertarian, I really think that job security, getting a job, is kind of a way to pin you down, as opposed to letting you take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. Go for it. Go for it.
So that actually takes me to something you told me back. I mean, it was probably 2012 or 2011. I don't know what year it was exactly. But on the campaign trail, we got to spend a lot of time just driving. I didn't mention before, I was actually your state director in Iowa for a while.
I know that.
You told me you are the director of your own movie. Your life is a movie, and if you don't like something about your life, go out and change it. And I took that literally to meaning that I needed to go make a movie, and went out and made these documentaries on the housing bubble. So I guess where where did you get that from? Was that something that you believe you were just born with, that entrepreneurial energy and worldview, or is that something you got from your parents? Or
Gosh, my mom, and I took this as a big compliment. Gary, where did you come from? Where did you come from? I said, Mom, you're responsible. No, I'm not responsible for this at all. I don't know where you came from, Gary. I don't know what keeps you going, but so be it. And then my dad paid me a really big compliment too. He said, Gary, I've talked about doing all the things in my life that you're doing, and I never did. I talked about them, but you did them. So anyway, big compliments, and I don't know where it came from, Jimmy. I really don't. I really
yeah,
don't.
your dad wasn't he in World War II? Or
He was in World War II. He was in the 101st Airborne Division. He paratrooped into Normandy before the D-Day invasion. He got
wow,
several Purple Hearts. He lost a lung at the Battle of the Bulge, having gotten bayoneted in the back. The
oh my
the uh,
gosh,
the television series Band of Brothers, that was the
mm.
story of the 101st going through the war, and that was my father basically. I mean, the Band of Brothers, that's the story of my father through the entire war.
Did he talk about it at all, or was he quiet about
Not
it?
really, not really.
Mhm.
And here's a surprise that was big for me. During COVID, I found out that I have two half brothers by different mothers,
Oh wow,
as in my father fathered two sons by different mothers before my mother and he got together. They were married. My mother and father were married for 65 years before they passed away 13 days apart. But I found out
oh wow.
that I had two, and have met with them, and one of them has since died. He was in poor health, and the other one, what a bonus. I call him my bonus brother.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's so amazing that you get to meet him.
Isn't it? And that's my
Yeah,
father. And with DNA testing and him having been over in Europe, Who knows? Who knows? I might have
Yeah,
other siblings also. We'll see.
that's
A
very
good
interesting.
thing. A
So
good thing.
then something similar happened to our composer Jake Dilley that you remember. He had just found out he was going to South by Southwest Music Festival for the first time for his band to perform, and he called his parents to tell them. And he found out that he had a cousin, just a cousin, but not a brother. But he found out he had a cousin, and the cousin lived in Austin and was a musician. And it was crazy getting to see them
Wow.
meet each other for the first time because they had so many similarities, like their personality. They just hit it off immediately. It's interesting.
Well, and that's been my experience also. Same thing.
So kind of moving forward from your construction company, when you ran for governor in the early 90s in New Mexico, you kind of ran as an outsider. It's not like the Republican Party just embraced you with open arms. At least that's my understanding. So what made you decide to run, and what was your campaign experience like?
Well, really, my entire experience having been governor, running for governor, I think is like fairy tale. It really is. I mean, I'd never been involved in politics before. I went and I introduced myself to the Republican Party of New Mexico. And what they said was, wow, we like you. We like what you've got to say. We'll make you part of the traveling circus. You can go around the state, make your pitch at all these events. You'll be welcome to do that. But you just need to know that you'll never, ever get elected governor in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat coming from completely outside of politics. It's not going to happen. So, how did it happen? Um, I ran 2 campaigns for governor where I did not mention my opponent in print, radio, or television. I mean, come on. How
Yes.
many campaigns have you looked at that hasn't been negative? Well, and the state's 2-to-1 Democrat. I run as a Republican. I get elected and I get reelected. That's kind of sort of a fairy tale. And I kind of think that's where everybody lands. I think everybody is kind of sort of libertarian. They really don't know that. But if you take Trump, for example, I think half of what Trump does is just wonderful. I really do. The other half is just kind of batshit crazy. Um, we had Biden far left, and that got thrown out. Now we got Trump, and when you factor in the batshit crazy, it's a little crazy. I think most of us are somewhere in between, and in between is just common sense, just common sense. But I think people really would like to see good stewardship of tax dollars, and I think I provided that in spades.
Yeah, so when you went into office, there was a $1.8 billion budget deficit, I believe. And then when you left office, there was a $1 billion budget surplus. And I believe you vetoed more bills than all 49 other governors combined, or something to that
Maybe,
effect.
maybe. I mean, I make that claim. I'm waiting to be disproved on that, but
Well,
I
nobody's
vetoed.
done it yet, so we're gonna go with it.
Well, I vetoed 500 bills over the course of 8 years, and as the years went on, less and less legislation made it to my desk because, why submit legislation that's going to get vetoed? Why not submit
Right.
legislation that might have the chance of passing? And I wrote a veto message for every single thing that I vetoed, and for the most part, look, if all this legislation is going to do is add time and money to my life, I don't need it. If it's going to actually make a difference, sure, I'm going to sign on to that. But, well intentioned, but my favorite bill that I vetoed was a dog and cat exercise bill. It was a Republican bill. It was going to require pet shops to exercise their dogs and cats 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. Jimmy, that's where I would like to buy my dogs and cats, is in a store that says, hey, we exercise our dogs and cats 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. Come buy our animals because they're in good shape. Well intentioned, but I'm going to veto this bill because at some point, somebody's going to have to fund the dog and cat exercise police. And that's the nature of government. That's the nature of government, is well-intentioned, and then all of a sudden you got a bureaucracy surrounding dogs and cats being exercised in your town because of a law that's been passed.
So did this just piss off everybody in both parties? Like, I know you're well liked by the people, but as far as like the people in the parties, like the party system, like for example, I was a page in the state legislature, and like I know that before they do all their debates and everything, they go in their little rooms and the Republicans talk and the Democrats talk, and I know they're saying like, hey, if you don't support this or if you don't support that, you know, you're not going to have as much campaign money with your upcoming reelection and all that sort of thing. So like, did everybody just hate that you were, you know, putting your foot down and stopping all this government spending?
Yeah, I think so. And I had a very confidant who said, he said, you know, the best thing about you is you veto all this stuff. You don't negotiate. You're basing everything on a kind of a common sense business approach: best product, best service, lowest price. That's the best thing about you, Gary. It's also the worst thing, because we don't wheel and deal anything around here. It's pretty cut and dry.
You got any crazy stories, like any corruption, anybody trying to bribe you, anything like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, you know, I do have those stories, and in every single case, it was well, I got to use this line a couple of times, which was, "Hey, I donated $5,000 to your campaign, and you vetoed my bill." And I would respond, "Well, first of all, I didn't know that that was your bill. Secondly, the bill is highway robbery. It's not fair to anybody, but apparently you. And if you'd like a refund, I'll send you a check." Nobody took advantage. I got to use that line a couple of times. On a couple of
Nice.
occasions, look, I got $50,000 here that I will give to you if I can get appointed to X, Y, or Z, assuming that I'm qualified. That was their statement. And I said, you got the wrong guy. Appreciate the offer. You know, I don't want to make people angry, but that's not what we're doing here.
Is there no people? Obviously, there's not no, but are there a small amount of other people taking advantage of those opportunities? Like, how widespread do you think corruption really is?
Well, here's the new thing.
Even in the United States.
I think the Clintons developed this science, and that's pay to play, which is, okay, you call the governor's office and you'd like to get a meeting with the governor. Now, I didn't do any of what I'm about to describe to you, but this has been standard operating procedure. Clintons, I think, having developed this science. And that is, hey, I'd like to get a meeting with the governor. And the receptionist will say, well, let me check and see if we can get that meeting with the governor. Well, in an hour or so, you're going to get a call that says, hey, you want a meeting with, no, they're not going to mention the meeting with the governor, but what they're going to say is, you have not contributed to the governor's special, PAC. Move America Forward. You haven't contributed to Move America Forward. We'd love a $5,000 contribution. Well, if you contribute the $5,000, lo and behold, you'll get a call that says, yeah, the governor's going to meet. Yeah, the governor would love to meet with you. $5,000 doesn't buy you anything other than a meeting. And that's just the first grease job that you're going to have to perform along the way, because it's going to be $5,000 many times over. And then if you say, no, I'm not able to pay the $5,000, you're going to get a call in a very short amount of time saying, oh, the governor is not going to be able to meet with you, doesn't want to meet with you. And in my case, Jimmy, I know I told you this, I was the only governor in the country that had an open door after 4 policy, where I met with anybody in the state on the 3rd Thursday of every month from 4 o'clock until 10 o'clock in the evening on 5-minute increments. I knew more about state government than anybody else because of Open Door After 4. I really had a good, and I found out about the bureaucracy mistreating people, and I was able to affect immediate change because of that. So there was never I can't meet with the governor. If there was somebody that I told the receptionist, no, I understand their issue, and no, I'm not going to support them, or I'm going to support them, and they would say to the receptionist, well, I can't get a meeting with the governor, but I really need to talk to him. Hey, come on in, Open Door After 4. So nobody could say they couldn't meet with me. Nobody could make that claim.
It seems like a different world than it is today. Like everything's
No,
so
it
closed
is.
off. Obviously, social media, like they can do ask me anything and stuff like that, but they definitely still like choose among the question.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's so negative. It's so negative. Politicians call me all the time for my advice. And here's the first thing that I tell them. First thing I tell them is, people call me all the time for my advice. And guess what? Nobody listens to a single word that I have to say. And what I have to say, what I start out with and end with, is just be positive. You're there to sell yourself. You're there, you're not, this isn't an election about the lesser of two evils. This is about me. And here's what I stand for. And, listen to my opponent. I'm not going to cast judgment on what he has to say. You make that judgment.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize how many people aren't voting for someone; they're voting against somebody.
Well, and that's the campaigns of today. And a response is, well, gee, the only campaigns that work are negative campaigns. Well, those are the only campaigns that exist. You don't see any positive campaigns. None. Zero. It's all about this guy's a scumbag, and bottom line, I'm lesser of a scumbag. No, that's not the argument I want to make.
So I do remember you telling me a story about I'm not sure if it was 60 Minutes or some other news organization came to New Mexico. Maybe after you announced you supported decriminalization or something like that. But what you told me was that this news team followed me around with the camera for 3 days or something like that. And you told me they could have made that story however they wanted. They could have made you look like an idiot. They could have made you look great. And you said, thankfully, they made you look great. But that really stuck with me, and it's something that, over the years, as we've seen what the media does, like, for example, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but like with your presidential campaign, particularly when you're running as a libertarian, everybody in the media they weren't interviewing you to get to know you. They were interviewing you to try to make you look bad and make you not be a threat to either Trump or the Republican Party or the Democrats. Like it was very obvious. And like people have seen Stephen Colbert over the years, obviously, with his late night show. And I think people are a lot more aware now of how politically misleading he is, and just kind of how much of a prop piece he is for the establishment. But like, I mean, he just openly mocked you in the campaign, and like there were interviews where they were trying to get you to make mistakes. And so I'm getting out of myself a little bit here, but I just want to ask you, like, what is it like having that campaign where you're always under attack? Because like we said before, the Republicans don't want to cede their power to the libertarians, and the Democrats don't either. And so everywhere you went, you were facing attack. So what was that like, I guess?
Well, the reality, I mean, that was just the reality. And, you try and do your best under those circumstances. The biggest factor in politics is money. That's the biggest factor. In 2016, Hillary had $1.8 billion. Trump had $1.8 billion. And Gary Johnson and Bill Weld had $12 million. When you do the math on our 4.5 million votes for 12 million, as opposed to their votes that cost them $1.8 billion apiece, believe me, where was the bang for the buck in that, in all that? Well, it was with us. But politics is about money. You don't have to have more money, but you have to have money on a parity level. You have to have money to be able to compete. I'll never forget that during the campaign, the New York Times came out with an article on Friday. It was online. It said, "Watch out, Hillary. Gary Johnson is getting more support than you are among millennials." Well, I was looking at the internet like every day. I mean, hey, I'm running for president. I'm looking at the internet, and for the most part, it's pretty darn even. Little bit of bad, little bit of good. The in between was there for the most part, and for the most part, we're all in between. But after that article appeared on that Saturday, and it was said that there were individuals that were spending $100 million to discredit me. Well, on that Saturday, looking at the internet, all of a sudden there are 25 articles that appear first in line on the internet that basically say, this is the dumbest guy that's ever walked the planet, Gary Johnson, as in Gary Johnson. Well, that's where that discredit came from. And it was a bombardment of untruth. Once again, I'm willing to put up with the truth. I'll be the first one to admit to my mistakes. But combating that was, we had $12 million to combat this. When you have $1.8 billion and that stuff appears, you can combat all that. We couldn't combat it.
That it's crazy how much the debates didn't matter in this last election, because as far as like having a bunch of debates and getting to see that. But going back to your first campaign, like that was the real issue, is if you're not allowed into the debates, then how do you fundraise? Because people realize you're not a candidate that's being led into the system. So we actually did something. This is something I'm proud of. You and I did something.
I am too. Proud
and this is the first time anyone. Yeah, this was the first time anyone had done this at this point. And in 2012, when the Republicans excluded you from the debate, which you were polling well at that point, it was just most of the polls didn't have you listed as an option.
Polls, right?
Yeah, right.
At the time, I mean, I'll let you go on with the story because I love that story also. But when CNN holds a debate and they say that you have to be at 3% in the polls, and that 3% has to be the average of 5 polls that they've conducted. Well, I know I'm on the fringe, but when you're not in 2 or 3 of those 5 polls, how do you turn out with a 3% average? You can't. Right. Anyway, and that stuff goes completely unnoticed by everybody. Nobody notices that.
Yeah, so the first time they left you out of the debate, we were in Council Bluffs. I believe it was Council Bluffs. We might have been over in Omaha. No, I think we were in Council Bluffs. But so you had an event that night, and then I recorded the debate, and then this was the first time anybody ever had a chance to respond to presidential debate questions without being in the debate. And so I filmed your answers in the hotel room and stayed up all night editing it, and then put it out in the morning. And it's funny, I think Evan actually told me, he's like, whatever you do, don't make it look like he's in the witness protection program, like being in this hotel room and everything. And I didn't have lights or anything. And oh my gosh, does it look like you're in the witness protection program? Another thing I'll add is sometimes in the questions, they would use the candidate's name. And so I overdubbed my voice sarcastically saying your name, and that got a bunch of press, just that alone. But we ended up reaching millions of people, and they got to see your answers that next day, and we got tons of press out of it. So that was one thing that I was excited about. And I'm glad you did eventually get into the debates. And when you did have a chance to answer substantive questions, You did a great job and you had great opportunities. But honestly, like looking back, I looked at or I watched that video of that debate, and some of the questions were, do you like Jay Leno or David Letterman? Do you like Elvis or Johnny Cash? I think the first debate you were in, you were given one question, and it was, if you were in a reality show, what would the reality show be? And it's just like people think like, okay, this absurd reality show type, pop culture type stuff now with Trump and everything. It's like, yeah, but it was back then too. Like, it's kind of a joke, some of this stuff.
No, I agree. I agree. And Trump has turned the whole debate process on its head. He's turned politics on its head. Absolutely. Where does it go from here? You're going to have a Trump wannabe, and if the Dems don't, if the Dems don't stop giving away free stuff, I don't know. I don't know what the end game is for the Dems.
Well, it is also interesting to see your responses to the good questions in that debate, because one of the questions they asked you is, do you think they're going to raise the debt limit? And it was like, of course they raise the debt limit. Like it's basically infinity now, right? So it's interesting looking back now. Obviously the debt is so much higher, and as we've seen interest rates come up, just like you warned was going to happen, it was basically like an adjustable rate mortgage, where now we're spending over $1 trillion just on interest on the debt. It's overwhelming the budget. And you talked about unfunded liabilities and Medicare and how that was going to overwhelm the budget, and the stuff that we've seen in healthcare since then. It really is interesting to go back and look at your answers, because it would be a very different country in a very different world if you had gotten elected. I mean, the things you were talking about, balancing the budget immediately, cutting spending, military spending by 43%, not going into Syria and Libya and Yemen and all these countries. Like it, obviously I just listed a bunch, but is there anything that looking back you think, man, I really wish this one thing I could have gotten through, or I could have gotten done?
No, I really, I mean, yeah, there are small things, but overall, it is what it is. And I thought we did a pretty good job. And now I'm back to that money analysis of what we spent, and having gotten 4.5 million votes for our $12 million. That's pretty remarkable. It really is. But I really thought we would do better also, and so there's a disappointment that it didn't that it wasn't better than what it was. But no, I don't have any regrets. It allows me to do what I want to do when I want to do it right now in my life, and I'm a happy cat.
That's good. I'm glad.
Ski 100 days and then bicycle the other days. And
how old were you when you started skiing?
I was 16.
16. Okay.
I was thinking the other day that of all the things in my life that have had an impact on my life, skiing's probably number one. And that would be the people that I met, and just the revelations that went along with being able to ski. How much it costs, is expensive. And,
right.
How do you manage this? How do you make it happen, given that I love skiing? I'm addicted.
In August, I'm going to hike Half Dome and hopefully do a day of climbing out there as well. So I'm pretty pumped about that.
And should be. And since we were together, I have done the 7 summits. I've summited the highest mountain on all 7 continents.
Let's actually go through those. What was the first one that you did?
Denali. Oh, gee, that's McKinley now. Sorry. Anyway,
that probably wasn't your first mountain, but what was it like climbing that?
Well, I did it with a couple of buddies, and our plan was, hey, if we're successful doing this, let's try the 7 summits. Let's try it. Well, my 2 buddies, that was the only mountain they climbed, but it was McKinley in Alaska, and we took everything but the kitchen sink. We made it we were self-guided, and the takeaway from that one was we took way too much stuff. We naked me plus 155 pounds. That's what I
Oh,
carried.
wow.
That included a
Wow.
sled. And so we took way too much stuff. But it was always fun, every single one of them. I get this a lot, which was, wow, you conquered the 7 summits. I didn't conquer one of the 7 summits. There was just a whole lot of good grace, whole lot of good luck. And of course, you prepare as well as you possibly can, but they all went well. They all went well.
Would you say it was a shared experience with the mountain? You weren't fighting the mountain, you more went on a journey with the mountain.
I like that, Jimmy. I like that. Yes, it was a shared experience with the mountain.
So you went someplace that very few people have been. So you did Antarctica. There's one in Antarctica that you did.
Yeah, that was the last one that I did. That was Vincent in Antarctica. And the reason for it being the last one is on a per day basis, it was very expensive. It was the most expensive on a per day basis. The logistics are unbelievable, but yeah, the last one was Antarctica. Vincent, the temperature. Do you know what the driest region is in the entire world? It's Antarctica. Do people realize that
Never would
Antarctica
have guessed that.
Antarctica is bigger geologically speaking than the United States? It's huge. And the average temperature in Antarctica was 36 below the whole time we were there. Never
Wow.
really varied at all. And the average rainfall precipitation in Antarctica is like a half an inch of snow a year.
Dude.
So there were footsteps going to Vincent that had been there for years. Other parts had been blown over, but there were
Wow.
footsteps that may have been years old, which is surprising, isn't it? I mean, that's a surprise. You'd think Antarctica is, very moisture laden. It's not at all.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the all the notable explorers over time. Like they really did, they maybe got to go to one part of the world where you got to go see all these different continents. Like how did the different mountain experience like range? Obviously, you just talked about Antarctica, but like in Africa, was it substantial? Did everything look different on each mountain, or were they similar because they're at such a high elevation?
Yeah, no, there was differences in every single one. Kilimanjaro, for example. Uh, and by the way, I get this a lot too. There's so many people on each one of these mountains. None, none of these mountains are going to see less attempts to climb these mountains. The highest mountain on each continent, there's a lot of people that want to do one of these.
And
Kilimanjaro being one of them, but Kilimanjaro, here it is. Basically, you go from the tropics to 19,500 feet. That's a big difference. And then you come back down to the tropics again. So yeah, each one of Karsten's pyramid in on the continent of Australasia in New Guinea. I put it at the second hardest mountain, but it was 45 miles in, 45 miles out, a 5'9" rock climb at the end. And
wow.
I would say 5 inches of rain a day. Whoa,
Dang.
whoa.
Yeah, rock climbing is a lot harder when the rocks split.
Yeah. So each one was an adventure.
So what number was Everest?
Number two.
Number two. Okay. And you had
Yeah.
broken your leg before, right?
Yeah, I broken my leg prior to going. And, I mean, you make a choice when you break your leg. And the doctor said right away, you can still go to Everest. Just get in the swimming pool tomorrow. No anti-inflammatories, no cast, because the bone is still, even though it's a full
Mhm.
fracture, it'll heal. So my leg was uh, 8 inches bigger in diameter than the good leg.
Oh man.
And so you make a choice. I mean, it's kind of life, right? You have setbacks in life. Do you choose to lay on the couch and give up, or hey, this is just part of life and deal with it? And I'd like to think I've always been on the latter side of that, meaning I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it and I'll make it work.
I love that. So going back to when we worked together on your campaign, I want to tell a story real quick. I think I told you this at Freedom Fest in 2019, but we were going from Des Moines to Iowa City, and we had separate vehicles, and I didn't have cruise control, so I was following behind you, and you called me as we were coming into Iowa City, and you were like, "Hey, I don't know where we're going. Go ahead and pass me, and I'll follow you into town so I can get there." And of course, you didn't slow down. And so I passed you, and a cop flips around and doesn't turn his lights on, but is clearly trying to pull me over. And you did not let the cop in at first. You just kept right on my tail, not enough room for him to get in. And then he started swerving over a little bit. And so you backed off enough to let him in. But he pulls behind me, and he comes within a few feet of hitting your vehicle and my vehicle, and then turns his lights on. And so obviously I got a ticket. I don't remember if I was going 80. I think I was going 80 and a 70. Okay. And I fight the ticket. I go into court, and I get to question the officer after he recounts the incident. And so I ask him, I go, "Okay, so do you remember the car behind me, that was pretty close behind me? And do you remember, swerving over and, coming within a few feet of hitting our cars or whatever?" And he's like, "Oh, no, I don't know anything about that or whatever." And so I was like, "Well, why wouldn't you turn on your lights and everything?" And like, so I kind of established like that I was pissed off, and like that this guy was acting a little aggressive, and he put me in an unsafe situation. And so then I lead up to this final question, and my final question in front of this judge was, "Do you believe it is safer and I should choose to drive 70 miles an hour a couple feet away from another vehicle, or do you believe it is safer to drive 80 miles an hour about 25 feet away from another vehicle?" And the officer goes, "I believe it's safer to drive 70 miles an hour a couple feet away from another vehicle." He actually said that. I go, "I have no further questions, Your Honor." And then I ended it right there. And they were like, "Okay, well, you're still going to have to pay the ticket." I said, "Okay." But,
Wow.
that was another fun story from the campaign. But I remember you would say a libertarian, somebody that if they pull up to a stoplight and it's the middle of the night and they look around, they drive through the stoplight.
Well, yeah, and but then back to driving. The speed limit is 70 miles an hour, let's say. Well, under circumstances, you know what? You can be driving 90 through that 70 perfectly safe. No cars in front of you, no cars in back of you, right? Perfectly safe. At other times, if you go 70 and it's marked 70 and it's bumper to bumper, 70 may not be the speed limit. It might be 55 to be safe. So it's always about being safe. And I realize that speed limits are about being safe, but as a libertarian would say, well, if I can drive 100 and there's no cars, let me drive 100. If the speed limit's 70 and I'm going 70 bumper to bumper, come on, really? I should be going 55.
Well, and thankfully we have states that are allowed to have different speed limits, so we can see that it actually does work in those places. There's roads in South Dakota and Montana that they'd be 55 here, but you can go 70 there.
Well, and then Montana, Wyoming, they got posted speed limits of 80 now. And Montana didn't used to have posted speed limits like the Autobahn. I believe the Autobahn doesn't have speed limits.
Right. Yeah, I've been on it. That was one of my dad's joys of visiting Germany, was getting to drive on the Autobahn.
Yeah.
I guess before we wrap up, I just want to go back to the way I left your campaign. So I didn't actually work on your libertarian campaign. I worked for Our American Initiative, and then I worked on your Republican presidential campaign. But I had the idea for these documentaries where I interviewed people that predicted the housing crash, and go out and try to explain the economics behind what happened and what we were expecting. And I just want to thank you so much because you really gave me the confidence and really encouraged me to pursue that project. I don't know if you telling me to quit the campaign and pursue it full time was an indictment on the work I was doing, or if you just really believed in me. But no,
I really believed in you. I really believed in you.
Before I left the campaign, we went to Chicago for a CPAC event, or sorry, not CPAC, a Cato event, and you snuck into the Chicago Federal Reserve with me and filmed a promo video for my documentary. And so people can go back and actually see you standing next to a cube of $1 million talking about all the bailouts and how they created all this money for the bailouts and stimulus and how that was going to set us up for failure. And obviously prices were going to be higher than they would be otherwise. And so I want to thank you for, breaking the rules and sneaking into the Chicago Federal Reserve.
Anytime, Jimmy. Anytime.
Do you remember going to KushCon in Denver?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was a college dropout, but I'd studied economics. But as part of the research for the documentary, I didn't want to finish my degree, and I still didn't, even though I earned a degree, basically. I went back to school and took all the economics classes to get a degree because I wanted to be able to say that, I took the class based on Ben Bernanke's textbook. I wanted to be able to argue against how they taught all these things. And so I had a midterm for an economics class, and I had a test. And I use marijuana, and I believe it helps me focus. And I know it affects everybody's brains differently, but for me, it helps me focus and gets me it puts me in the zone basically. And so I had this midterm, and marijuana's legal there. I had acquired some marijuana, and I was staying in your son's house, and you were sleeping upstairs. And it was the middle of the night because obviously, we were working all day on the campaign. And so after everybody went to bed, I was going to take my midterm. And so I go ahead and I sneak out, and I've got a bong in my hand, and I sneak out, and the security alarms go off and all the spotlights come on me. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I just woke up Gary standing there with the bong. But I ended up getting an A in class and on the midterm, so it worked out. But
good story.
Gary, I love you, man. It's been great, and I appreciate all the opportunities you gave me. And I'm really glad that people get to see the side of you and hear some of these stories.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
I had a great time, and if you ever need anything, let me know. If I'm ever in New Mexico, I'm going to hit you up and try to go skiing.
Well, come stay and ski. Bring your daughters, bring your wife.
Sounds good.
Thank
you, Gary.
All this has happened before, and it will all happen again.
The reality is we have gone from a stock market bubble. Now we have a housing bubble, and when it breaks, whatever causes it to pop, then a lot of people are going to find out, oh my God, not only are my stocks down, my house is down too, and now what do I do?
Charlie, this was the day we were afraid to wake up to, the bankruptcy of one major Wall Street investment bank, the shotgun wedding of another.
Can't be distracted. What's going on with the war? What's wrong with the economy? Stop worrying about that.
They're not only doing the wrong thing, they're doing exactly the opposite of the right thing.
We got into our mess by spending too much money, running up too much debt, and printing too much money, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Which, by the way, would seem how we got into this state of affairs in the first place.
You have to work for money, kids.
No, you don't. It comes from the machine in the wall. I've seen it. Yeah, you just have to push buttons.
Take a greater risk on these mortgages, yes. To give families mortgages who they would not have given otherwise, yes.
It means we use the mighty muscle of the federal government in combination with state and local governments to encourage owning your own home. That's what that means.
I ask all of you just one more time to look at that chart. And I wish I had a lot of other charts to show you that would reinforce that.
You can't buy a house before you have a job.
You get a job, you save for a down payment, then you buy the house.
A lot of people are going to find out, oh my God, not only is my stocks down, my house is down too, and now what do I do?
Jim Rogers knew these bubbles were going to burst, but I didn't. Neither did filmmaker Jimmy Morrison, who started a house painting business less than a month after home prices peaked. His timing couldn't have been worse, but we don't have to make those mistakes again. There are people out there who called it, and next time, maybe we can too.
We've got a growing economy, jobs, incomes. We've got very low mortgage rates.
Housing is going to be a disaster in the next 5 years. You sell housing stocks and you sell Ben Bernanke.
One myth that's out there is that what we're doing is printing money. We're not printing money.
These days, they don't need a printing press. All they need is a computer keyboard.
So we're not a free market then. There is an invisible, there's a benevolent hand that touches us.
Absolutely.
These people in the government apparently don't learn anything at all.
They broke it, and they're trying to fix it by doing more of what broke it in the first place.
The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that.
What?
Of course it could happen again, and it's happened before.
Raw materials were allocated between essential and non-essential business.
I hope they don't lose confidence in their government. I can see why there's skepticism, but it's the only government we got.